here on the show. One of the things we've learned over the course of this election is that more and more people are getting the news, not from necessarily the traditional news outlets. People aren't necessarily going to CBS. They're not going to NBC. They're not going to CNN. They're not going to Fox News. They're not going to MSNBC or what have you. A lot of people are getting the news from influencers. Some like myself. Some like, the Young Turks. Some like the Midas Touch. Some like, what's some right wing, the Daily Wire, all these other different online platforms, man. People are getting the news in a bunch of different ways. Some people are getting the news from TikTok. Some people are getting the news from, unfortunately, shit like fucking My Expert Opinion, podcasts and things like that, right? And one of the things that I talked about, in the course of the last couple of weeks, man, was that because the barrier of entry for getting on these microphones and having a platform and having a channel and everything else, because the barrier of entry is low, oftentimes the quality of the information that a lot of people are getting is also low, right? I said that a couple weeks ago, and I was proven right. I was proven right by this particular article. So we get this story here. This comes out of CNN. And it says that the majority of social media influencers don't verify their information before sharing it, a study finds. Now, mind you, I talked about this, like I said, a couple weeks ago. We get the story here. This comes out of CNN. Also, I make sure when I do this shit here, I tell y'all where I'm getting the shit from. So if you like the source or not, you know exactly where I'm coming from when I got this particular, wherever I get my information from, I make sure you guys know where I got it from. Okay. That's very big. I'm keen on keeping that practice open. But it says a majority of social media influencers don't verify information before sharing it with their audiences. A study published Tuesday by the UN Scientific and Cultural Arm found underscoring concerns that some of the biggest online figures can uncritically spread misleading claims. According to the UNESCO study, 62% of surveyed creators said that they don't vet the accuracy of content before sharing it with their followers. Roughly 1/3 of influencers said they shared information without checking its validity if it originated from a source that they trusted, while 37% said that they verified information with a fact-checking site before circulation. The study, which surveyed 500 digital content creators across 45 countries and territories in August and September 2024, included creators with more than 1,000 followers. While only 12% of the surveyed influencers said they produce content content about current affairs and politics and the economy, UNESCO warned that the low prevalence of fact-checking highlights their vulnerability to misinformation, which can have a far-reaching consequence for public discourse and trust in media. Rather than verified information, more than 4 in 10 influencers said they evaluated a source's credibility based on popularity, the number of likes and views it had received, while 1 in 5 said trusted friends and experts were the most common factors in determining an online source's credibility. Only 17% said documentation and evidence was the top factor in gauging credibility. I'll be goddamn if I haven't been talking about that. We just talked about that because so many people rely on online sources, and we talked about the popularity of the source. This is why I thought when we were talking about what was the fucking show, My Expert Opinion, why I was talking about those dudes have 1 million fucking subscribers on YouTube, and those dudes have a host who is prone to listening to misinformation and disinformation and disseminating that bullshit to his audience. 1 million people subscribe to that show. And if he's susceptible to listening to bullshit and misinformation and disinformation, somehow, some way, the audience is susceptible to listening to that because, again, the credibility comes from the popularity, right? Their credibility comes from their popularity in much the same way that oftentimes you've heard this, man, where people will make all kinds of excuses and they will make all kinds of excuses. They will make all kinds of, they will give all kinds of grace to anything so long as it makes money, right? So you could have like let's just use hip hop as an example. You could have a terrible fucking rapper like Soulja Boy, right? Soulja Boy is a terrible fucking rapper, but because people had made it to where Soulja Boy could be financially viable, suddenly any critique of Soulja Boy falls on deaf ears because Soulja Boy is making people money, despite the fact that the quality of the music is shit. The same thing follows here. The platform has popularity. And if the platform has popularity, oftentimes, even though the information can be shit, because the platform has popularity, it's been given validity, despite the fact that it doesn't deserve it. This has been the crux of the issue when it comes to what's happening here in America right now politically. Because if your popular influencers can't be bothered with vetting the information that they are putting across their platforms, then those people who are further less inclined to figure out whether or not this information is true or not are being fed this bullshit, and it goes further. That's just the reality of the situation, right? We've been talking about this for the last couple of weeks. We got a couple comments here. My man Jay Full says, he says, one of my favorite things about your show is that you always say where you got whatever news you're sharing. Bro, I want, because I want not only that, because there's sometimes where I'm reading, I've heard about some stuff, and like I'm looking for sources of where that shit came from. And sometimes the only source of where it is like, yo, it might be some shit like, it might be Baller Alert. It might be some fucking hip hop website I've never heard of. And I always tell y'all, take this shit with a grain of salt. But this is what they're saying on this particular website, right? Stop. Okay, fucking phone. But like, this is what I always make sure that I tell y'all where I'm getting my shit from, man. Because I want y'all to understand that, like, even if some of the shit that you may hear here might be coming from somewhat questionable, hey, I heard it from here, take from it what you will. But I'm never going to tell y'all some shit and like not, and like, I think the quality of the source matters. I'm not a journalist. I am a fucking pipe fitter, right? But I think the quality of the information matters. And if we have content creators who can't be bothered with trying to figure out whether or not if they on a platform talking some bullshit or whether they're talking some real shit, that won't be me. That won't be me. So I appreciate you, brother, for acknowledging that, man. I really do. Because that's like, this is the issue. This is how we end up with so much shit flying past. There's so much misinformation. There's so much misinformation and disinformation being meted out, man. Where, like, I talked about this, man. It's like, it's a deluge, man. It's like a fire hose of misinformation and disinformation. And for those of us who want to be out here talking about the real shit and talking about the truth, oftentimes it's so much bullshit, you can't combat all of the bullshit people are being fed. Right? So, you know, it's exhausting, but especially going into these next 4 years, I think it's going to be incumbent and important amongst those of us who are and consider ourselves content creators, who consider ourselves voices, who consider ourselves people who want to inform the folk. Hey, man, like, this is a job. Despite the fact that I don't get paid for this shit, I do this because I love it. But this is the job. You got to get out here, man, and tell the truth to the folk. And so, yeah, man, it doesn't surprise me. It does not surprise me whatsoever that so many content creators don't vet the information that they're coming across, man. Says only 17% of said documentation and evidence was the top factor engaging credibility. The prevalent lack of rigorous critical evaluation of information highlights an urgent need to enhance creators' media and information literacy skills. Now, again, we just talked about 54% of Americans are reading at a 5th or a 6th grade level and below. How many of those folks are also now content creators? Nigga! How many of those folks are out here like, yo, I'm just out here. Hey, it's about the good time. And there's a place for that. I ain't mad at those folks who are out here doing that. There's a place for that. But when it comes to getting into some of this like more substantial news and information and political stuff, and like, you know, like even some of the more pop culture stuff, man, and understanding how the pop culture influences some of our political choices. It's important for us to know that when we get information, we're getting information from reputable sources. We're getting information from people who care whether or not the shit is the truth or not. And oftentimes, man, like it's, you know, it's comment sections. It's just comment sections going up and down, man. But yeah, man, that's wild, man. Like social media influencers are not out here vetting the information that they are you know, promoting to the people, and that is a problem. That is a problem, man. Going forward, man, we got to be vigilant about that going forward, man.